Pete Yost here for the Unbuild It podcast with a word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. There are really three reasons why I think Huber Engineered Woods stands out, and it's a big part of why they're a sponsor of our Unbuild It podcast. First, they develop systems of products. The products are compatible and integrated. Makes our jobs a lot more easy in the field and when specifying. Second is superior tech support. There are really good website resources that they have developed for the application of their products, but they also have an outstanding 800 numbered tech team that really knows their stuff. And the last is a really active technical research and development team with whom I've done a lot of work over the years, and I have a lot of faith in the information I get from them when I have questions about product performance. So that's it. That's our high performance sponsor. Now on to the podcast.
Hello, Unbuild It podcast. Steve Basic here with Jake Bruin. We lost Peter Yost. He's too old to travel, so we're out on the road meeting really cool people. And you guys are in for one hell of a treat today because we're catching up with an old friend, at least for me.
Are you calling him old?
No.
Oh.
Our relationship is old. Please don't interrupt when I'm talking, Jake.
Not while Daddy's talking.
Yeah, be quiet over there. But it's Mark LaLiberte, and I probably met Mark back in, it was probably 96, 97, and he was the owner of a company called Shelter Supply. So all of you out there that think you got something on this whole energy efficient products and all of this and that, hell no. Mark was selling that stuff 40 years ago.
It's true.
So Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, buddy.
Hey, buddy. Nice to see you again, both of you guys. I've had the pleasure to work with you two for a while. About 1986 is when Shelter Supply got up and running, but we got it started about 84. And we were buying products like gaskets and sealants, ventilation systems. We brought the first air exchanger in from Canada called Van E in 1982, actually. And so we were selling ventilation equipment. Of course, it's in Minnesota. So we considered ourselves experts at selling products nobody wanted. So the only way you can do that is run around and teach everybody why they want the stuff that they need. So I would work with Pat Hellman from the University of Minnesota. Pat and I toured Minnesota for probably 7 years. We would go to all 20 HBAs all year round and just teach building science. And the two of us would spend all days somewhere from Duluth, Minnesota to the coldest regions of the country, of the state, and just talk about why buildings needed to be built tight. Combustion safety was a big thing at that time. So that's kind of Shelter Supply.
Trying to educate builders, like scare them into understanding what they're doing wrong?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. It's interesting. At the time, Minnesota was, when you have such a cold state, you have lots of things going on. The University of Minnesota had their Cold Climate Housing Research Center. And what they were doing there was looking at, combustion safety as a pretty prominent thing because as we got buildings tighter, Gary Nelson, of course, is there. You've got Minnesota Blower Door. You've got a really good group of people. It's where I first ran into Mac Pierce, is that there was this audience of people thinking about how buildings needed to perform. And there were a lot of problems. The University of Minnesota had a design housing apparel group out of St. Paul, and they were doing studies on cooktops and showing that the downdraft ranges weren't picking up anything anyway. And their high exhaust capacity was creating depressurization of buildings. And so they started doing the math. This is really late 80s where they said this capacity of exhaust was creating this kind of depressurization. So we set code standards to say here's the maximum depressurization you can have with this kind of atmospheric equipment. So if you had open combustion equipment, 150 CFM was the maximum depressurization. But in the earlier days, we were doing blower door tests with people in the building, caulking and sealing. So you'd set the building at 50 pascals and run around with caulk guns and foam guns, and somebody downstairs would yell, "Stop!" And you're like, what? Well, we're at 1,500 CFM. That's the magic stop spot. And you're like, okay. So nobody knew we'd make the building tight. The windows would be sweating. So, of course, early phase stuff. But we really had one working for a long time, and we realized that ventilation, whether it was exhaust only or at that time heat recovery ventilation, there was no ERVs at the time, still had to be part of the assembly. And then in 2000, we sold the company to a utility prior to deregulation, which was awesome. Started a company called Building Knowledge, and we had Building Knowledge was kind of a outgrowth of Shelter Source, which is a company I was doing with Shelter Supply to do training and research, and that was stuff outside of the Minnesota region. And then I sold that to a fellow named Ed Von Thoma and Pat O'Malley, who still do that, and started a company called Construction Instruction with Gord Cook and Justin Wilson, which we now still have in Denver, Colorado, where we do all kinds of crazy stuff. Testing wall systems. We're doing some really cool stuff with rock wool and impact testing and stucco testing and a whole bunch of wall assemblies. We have a 500 square foot house built inside of the research center where we've got 5 heating systems. We've got ERVs, HRVs, dehumidifiers, exhaust only equipment, ducts and attics, ducts and floors, ducts and crawl space.
And you offer classes during the year, right?
Yeah,
so people can, it's not a place where you just sit out there and play with cool stuff and then make videos and send them out to the world. People can actually come take a class with you guys for a week and learn different aspects of building.
Yeah, it's a 2-day class, and there's 5 different courses, but they're really on building science, advanced building science, HVAC, advanced HVAC, and then net zero housing. And most of them are just 2-day classes. So you go in. What we do is vacillate between the classroom and the lab. So I'll do an hour and a half in the classroom, and then we'll send them back to the lab, and we'll do all kinds of cool things. We've got mock-ups of convection currents in wall cavities showing smoke. We introduce smoke to the wall, and you can see it convect. I think you might have been there, Jake. And kind of looking at all the different pieces and parts between validating what we said in the physics and then having somebody go, so try this. Is this still hot? You're like, yeah, it's still hot. So we tried to validate the science with actual visual. We are such a tactile industry that when somebody can physically see it and hear about it, the odds of change are better.
Right. And also I want to point out, when I first met you, you also were a strong component on the education side because you were developing EBA, right?
The How's It Work series. In fact, I was doing How's It Work series kind of early on, and then we joined and got an opportunity. I got to work with Peter on some kind of curriculum development for a while. So I had been doing that for a very long time. And then when we started I did the first, for example, I worked with the American Lung Association, and we did the Health House, and that was 1989. In 1989, we created this thing with the American Lung Association in Minnesota about healthy buildings. And we started doing that in Minnesota, and then they started reaching out to the National American Lung Association, wanted to create that. Well, of course, once you do that, the politics kick in, right? So the American Lung Association wants some of the funding that they were getting from companies that were giving them a lot of money. 3M said, if you will let you put the American Lung Association logo on our filter, we'll give you $1 million, that kind of thing. And so then there got to be a power play. But we had American Lung Health Houses in about 5 different cities. And remember, remember Artistic Homes?
Yep.
They did a healthy American Lung Association Health House, got the local Albuquerque branch to then begin bringing health houses together. So that would have been late 80s, mid 90s.
Yep.
As far as that goes. So it's been a long time. And then I remember first doing some workshops for utilities in about 1985, 86. And I had somebody call up and they go, well, how much do you charge? And I was like, I gave him a number, and the guy goes, sounds good. I'm like, damn, that must have been too low.
Too low.
That was the first time I ever thought.
I think everybody does that.
I think
the salary lottery.
Salary lottery. Right? So you jump in and go, what happens if somebody says yes? It'll be amazing.
Yeah. No, but then EBA too, right? Energy Efficient Building Association, which I don't think they call themselves that right now.
Just the Alliance with the association.
The Alliance, right?
Yeah. Way to make it sound like an evil empire.
No,
the Alliance.
They did a lot of great things. I remember going to all the earlier sessions and spoke at a lot of the earlier conferences, and it was. I always loved that conference because it was about 500-600 people. You get in a class, there'd only be like 20 people in there, so it wasn't overwhelming. And as a young guy that just started out at building science, it was a great experience for me.
Yeah, I was the board president of EBA in 1992, but I went to my first EBA conference in 1982, and they had it's in Rochester, Minnesota, and so for a while it was just a Minnesota gig, and I think that's where some of that started. It was down at the Rochester Technical College that really got it started, and they started, getting a little bit larger. Jim Golden was the first CEO, and so it was kind of cool to see that group build from there and then grow to a more national presence like it is today.
Yeah. Oh,
you're right about it being like the right size conference for dipping your toes, and because it's a smaller conference, sometimes you can get some very specific information that you might not get at a larger conference. It's the first thing that I ever spoke at. I spoke there twice.
And then the exhibitors were kind of tuned to that environment where everything was kind of energy efficient and kind of durability and all of that stuff. You know, it was really cool. Learned about the Lesco boxes.
You send your tech guy that actually can answer the questions.
Yeah, there's people there that are wanting to do the right thing but understand how to do the right thing, not a person there that's, you just go to our website and you can find it all there.
Well said.
He's got a personal pet peeve that he's letting us hear.
I hate all manufacturers at the moment. I have, in the last 6 months, I have not been able to go to a website and answer the question I'm in search of in less than 30 seconds, which is horrible.
It is a weakness of that part of the whole industry and
they want to
websites
fill
in
out
general.
forms and all kinds of crap to get information from me. It's like, I'm not on here for an interview. I'm on here to get a goddamn little size of a window.
Right.
And it couldn't be buried anymore.
Which is actually a fantastic segue to Mark doing a big part of the construction instruction stuff and the idea that having that access to information, having that information in one place. Do you guys still have the app?
Oh, yeah. We started that, it's been 14 years, which was insane. You know, when we first did it, people were like, well, what's an app? We found a guy who was formerly with Apple, and he said, I could make you one. So an enormous amount of money later, we created the app. And so right now it has over 10,000 assets on the app. It's always been free. But the idea was really trying to maintain it is really complicated. But it's still out there. We have over 230,000 downloads of the app. So a lot of people still get on it. We have to play around with it and try to move it around. During COVID, we did a bit of filming on a bunch of different details and tried to load those things up. But it's a difficult thing to manage. It's why, every time you have an app in your phone of any type, somehow there's an update. I don't know why.
Every time.
But there's a freaking update about something. And so we have to do that all the time. They're like, somebody found a bug somewhere that made this thing freeze. So you have to go back and fix it. So
and half the time it doesn't do what I want it to do anymore.
Absolutely.
It's got to do something else, and I get aggravated.
For sure.
They updated Builder Trend in the last 2 weeks, and every person that works for me or with me has been frustrated, and I've kept it to myself that it pissed me off royally.
Exactly. You just leave it alone.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
I don't comment. So, basically, the gist of what I'm getting, Mark, is you've been at this for a decent amount of time. You've had a broad range of experience, and a large focus of the last 30 years of your career is making sure other people understand the right way to do things.
I got a test question for you. How did you meet Joe? I don't think I know that story.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't remember, but it was a really long time ago. I did come to the first one that was here, and that room was pretty small.
Yeah, but that would have been like 96. So if you were in this in 82, you had to know Joe when he was probably still in Toronto or something.
Yeah, I met him for his doctoral. Him and I had wine after he got his we were up in Toronto. But I knew him for quite a ways back, and can't remember quite back, but remember in 92 we had Brad Oberg, Betsy Pettit was on my board, so I was board president, Brad Oberg, and rest his soul, and Betsy were my board president, vice president, or vice president and treasurer. So those guys were around for a long time. We saw Dennis Creech, of course, with South Face. So there was a lot of people in that late 80s that were kind of hanging out. And Joe, of course, was always, since the first time I ever met him, he's been a leader.
Tornado in the room.
Yeah, he's just such a leader in sharing everything. He's just one of the most generous people you ever meet. And
I tell everybody, I think Joe's greatest asset is his belief that he's a curator of information.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think we are all standing on shoulders of giants, because Hannah Gordon, he would say the same thing. But Joe's really created the opportunity to be one of those people you could stand on the shoulders, because he shared so much practical information, brought in experts. He never claimed to be the expert. I would always think it was amazing. You'd come to summer camp, and if he wanted to, he could present continuously. Yeah. But he didn't do that. He would always bring someone along, and he knows so much about so many things. But he wants to bring a family of people to always learn, always understand, and share that kind of knowledge with so many. And you look at a conference like this, it's brilliant, right? 400 plus people come and share for 3 days. It's a unique camp. Literally.
And half the time is a social gathering.
Exactly.
So you can have all these conversations that are unassuming, and you can meet anybody from a manufacturer to the smartest guy on mold that the country knows. So it's
I saw Terry walking around.
I saw Terry. Yeah. I knew Terry for a long time as well. So there's so many great people here. I mean, you look at Thule and folks like that. So the industry's been full of a lot of leaders that have been so generous, I think. Yeah.
So when we come to something like this, or if I go to listen to people speak at any other conference, JLC, wherever, one of the things that I note is I think the majority of the people that I've listened to in the last 5 years have all been 5, 10, or 15 years older than me. There's nobody, I guess maybe 2 people presented today that are younger than me or close to my age, but the majority of the people in the room are older than me. And I was laying in bed in my hotel room last night in the middle of the night trying to get back to sleep going, who's going to be the next generation of people? Because right now, and maybe it's one of those perspective things where you're just like, oh, everybody that you respect's older than you sort of thing. But like I see our entire, from the guys that wear tool belts to the people that are speaking here, our entire industry.
Well, I mean, if you got up and said, okay, I'm going to talk about mold, and Terry was sitting in the front row, you'd be a little intimidated.
Yes, sir.
Like, where the hell am I going with this? He's right there. I'm like, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, but the quantum...
He's quote his paper constantly. Quote him and Nathan.
But I would say the speed at which the opportunity, thanks to the internet and things that have happened, is at the speed of acceleration. If you look at Travis and yourself and all the people that have really applied, not only applied the work and the knowledge in the field, and you, Stephen, as well, but also are at the same time talking to others about it, BS&Beer, and everything else that's happened has been a kind of a quantum leap to the speed it took before. This is 38 years for me. This should not take 38 years to get to where we are, and it won't anymore. And I think that we've gone past this point of prove it to me. Everybody will say, in the old days, it was, why are we building houses so tight? We still hear some of that shit here. But if you still look at the general gist, is that everybody agrees that thermal insulation, water management, indoor air quality, right sizing, building durability, those are all the fundamentals of what we all know how to do. And there's 15 ways to do this, not one. So as long as we all look at this the same way and share knowledge in a way that's never happened before, I can go on an Instagram feed that you've done or that Travis has done, and you show up.
We make it a rule to not speak positively about Travis on this podcast.
I can't help it. I love that guy. And so I think that you guys...
Who's Travis?
I saw him on it. You guys just had him on. I saw that. Or Matt did. But I think you look at this kind of exposure of saying, I'm doing this, and only in that forum could somebody say, I can't believe you did that, or, hey, that was really cool. So that would never happen before. You have to be in Minnesota, you do it, and no one would see it for 20 years. You go, yeah, it failed. Didn't think about that. Today you find out about the failure in somebody calling you up and going, you're an idiot. You really shouldn't do that. If I were you, I would fix that tomorrow. Yeah. And that's going to make things happen that you will be, and you are that kind of quantum speed. Nobody at my age had the knowledge that you currently have now. So I think you are and will be those people who are the experts. It took us a long time to get to be a broad breadth of knowledge, where there are people who are myopically focused on one or two tasks, but now we've got people much broader based, and I think that's important.
But I think the industry owes it to people like you and Joe and John Tooley and Gus, that these are the guys that brought information to the table and said, hey, this is the shit you should be worried about. And this is the stuff you should be concerned about. And yeah, it's, the industry corners like a freight train for sure. Mm-hmm. But you guys never cease to pound on that idea either, which is, commendable in the industry, because finally people are starting to say, okay, this does make sense. Right. Maybe there is some wisdom there that they're sharing. And
good point.
What I always find interesting is with that, you see some Instagram posts like somebody just invented the wheel. Mm-hmm. And it's like, are you kidding me? Joe and Mark talked about that 28 years ago at a conference. So it's no revelation there, buddy.
From the rest of our perspective that weren't here for that, it did feel like all these things were new. I can understand how, I didn't think at all about air sealing until 10 years ago.
Even today, you look at today's discussion about fire. I'm doing a bunch of fire stuff in California right now. We're doing a bunch of burns of different materials, some WUI interface. I picked up, I wanted to, if I could have shared some of that stuff today. We're doing hardy burns, treated plywood, treated OSB, flame block, rock wool. We're doing a whole bunch of flames. I had 6 burners going on at the same time a week ago, and just showing how the products behave, the length of time in which the burn can occur, which one of them fisher, which one of them start to smoke and flame roll over. It's really interesting to see that today, there was a discussion about WUI and international WUI codes, but California's pushing it hard, as they should, and really watching people say, so what am I supposed to do? Do I put this on? Is it okay to stick that on top of that? So it kind of goes back to this infant stage of how do I do thermal enclosures and moisture management along the lanes of fire. The Santa Rosa fire was not in WUI interface territory, and here's a place that burns to the ground. So there's a lot of things that we're going to see evolve, and the state of California is changing their WUI rules by the month. Because they're like, oh, shit, we should probably do this. And the international WUI goes, you heard them talk about today, they're kind of mad at California for being California.
Yep. I'm doing a project in Colorado, and the civil engineer is actually like the fire chief and some fire engineer in the county or something too. And it was interesting because we went out to lunch and had a nice long chat about fires. And he said it's kind of like 2 phases. He said there's the one that everybody seems to worry about where, like, is this going to burn, use something that's non-combustible? But he said also that some of these fires, if they're within like a mile of the house, they burn so intensely that your house is going to start on fire inside. Right. It's just going to combust because of the heat. And he said that, it doesn't matter what you build it out of, it's going to burn from the inside.
Yeah, and that's going to be, there will be things like breaching glass and things like that. Like I'm doing my house right now that I'm building. It's in Arizona, and I'm right up against the national forest. So I've done a whole bunch of things to manage fire. And I think part of that is that I've made the building incredibly efficient for the climate, but really resistant to fire in lots of different ways. Because I know that when the fire runs down the wash, in places like Arizona, it's a very intense, but it's a fast fire because you're not looking at large trees. The fuel isn't there, but the fuel's hot. It's creosote and turpentine bush and all those kind of things that are very intense in terms of heat. So I did a lot of different things to create a management of fire and still make it a net zero project.
Yeah. Tell us a little more about your house. So
yeah, that was a perfect segue. That was our next topic.
You said we had a time slot. So
that's right.
But it's something I've been working on for a long time. I had the great honor of having Steve work on some details with me as well. And so I tried to mix it up. I've used 5 or 6 different weather barrier systems. I've used peel and sticks, mechanically attached, fluid applieds, 4 different types of peel and sticks. I've used 4 different types of sealants.
So it's a test house.
It's a test house. Yeah,
so many ways. Just to piss off the builder.
It's Brad Levitt's the builder, who's been really great. Brad at AFT is just fantastic. But it's been a big learning curve for him, I think. So I've got ICF walls, and I used additional energy sticks in the ICFs. I've got a SIPS roof, so I had the ICF walls, and then I put a truss on the top. So I put a 14-inch truss on, and then on the truss I put the OSB on. I used I happen to use LP's. It's called Advant, or it's like Advantech. It's the same kind of thing. Okay. It's called Legacy. But I put that down on top and then seal all the edges of that, so that became the air boundary. And then on top of that, I had 8-foot wide and 24-foot long SIPS panels. Then get delivered by crane, and they dropped each one of those on top of the assembly. So they created this carryover of both overhang as well as an R52 roof. So now it's completely uninterrupted. So now the truss space is for all the mechanicals, all the wiring, and I don't have to insulate it. I can leave it as all conditioned space. So each one of the modules is an air buried system, and the roof becomes this kind of drop on top. It's really kind of cool.
And because you're using SIPs, you can have big overhangs?
Huge overhangs. Some of them are 5 feet long. And then the windows I used, there's a product called by Benelli, and it's a triple glazed window. I have U values between 0.12 and 0.14. And so 60% of the house is glazing. But the glazing and the way the house was that a good share of the glazing is north facing. I only have one west facing glass. And on the southern exposure, I have a kind of like a little portico. It's like a little roof system that's got louvers. So I can open the louvers in the winter and bring sunlight in on the south, but I can close the louvers and give me about a 7-foot overhang based on that. So the eastern windows are just narrow and small. I've got some overhangs. So I have a Mitsubishi 3.5-ton system that should have been 2 3-ton systems in the house, And I've got ERV. I used a Brony ERV. I've got RIA that I've used RIA in some applications. So I have a whole mix of technologies. Yesterday they had some spray foam in the ceiling of the garage to make sure that I was concerned about night sky radiation with a TPO roof. In the casita, which is another building, I wanted to do something conventional. So that's 2x6. It's got flame block on the outside in terms of the sheathing, and I have 2 layers flame block, one layer in and 1 layer out. On top of that is 2 inches of rock wool and then stucco. And on the roof is an open truss, but the roof has 2 inches of extruded polystyrene and then a TPO roof on top of that. And then the balance of the truss space has a 9-inch rock wool bat. So if the flame comes through that thing, there's got to be something serious. It's like the comet landed in the wash.
Yeah.
It'll be a tough thing to burn. And then with the windows, all the windows are tempered. So those will all help me a little bit survive. A triple glazed tempered assembly should help manage those things.
You hear that, everybody? That's triple glazed windows just outside of Phoenix, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, people always say, you don't need those windows down here in southern climates, but you buy energy, you want to hold on to it as long as you possibly can.
So true. And somebody told me, they said, APS said, if you want to think, that's the Arizona Public Service said, I had a little conversation with somebody at a fairly high level, and they said, you didn't hear this from me, but we will have power outages. And he said, you can't have a city that grows at 2 to 250 people a day and think that we've got the power to manage that. So between the amount of electric cars coming into the marketplace and the amount of people growing and the needs for water, we better be ready. So this is a 100-year-lived house. So the only time to put in triple glazing would be today. And so I'm not going to retrofit the glass. And the difference in cost to the triple versus the double and the overall performance to me was exactly what I wanted. I want incredible comfort and maybe add cooling to do that little dehumidification. I had Christoph do an analysis on it. He goes, you're going to need dehumidification. I'm like, you're crazy. There's no way. So he sends me a little printout of the dew points in August. I'm like, damn it. I might have to put in dehumidification.
You're like, what if we don't use the house in August?
I'm tempted not to use it in August for sure. So it's got all kinds of really cool stuff. I even put 3 inches of foam under the slab. So, when you look at cooling and slab cooling contributions in in hot climates, it would be technically prevalent to not put insulation on the slab. But really what I wanted to do is I wanted a building completely isolated from any of the conditions that I could control. So control is everything we're all about. Air tightness, thermal insulation, everything is called control. And I can control all of the aspects of how I want to condition that building. And so when I look at, again, a 100-year-lived building, it should be incredibly easy to heat and cool. And I'm at 3,800 feet elevation, and Phoenix is 1,000 feet. So I get just a smattering of snow. And I get some warm weather, and it's kind of hot, maybe no more than 100, and a little bit of rain. It's just perfect.
Probably get some nice breezes, too, at that elevation.
The way Mark describes it, it almost doesn't sound like where he's actually building a house. It sounds like he's making it up.
Yeah, it does. Sounds like I work for the Chamber of Commerce or something. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, I want to go back to minutia. First of all, I think it's amazing that I'm guessing you did it on purpose, but even if it was subconsciously, you talked about the overhangs and the roofing materials, the water management. You talked about the air barriers, and then you went right into, we're not screwing this up by putting a bunch of glass in it that sucks. Like, I like the fact that you sold it the way that we would try to sell it to somebody else too.
Exactly.
Air barrier connection from that roof deck down to, or I guess roof deck A, or the lower of the roof decks, down to the ICFs. How does that connection work?
It's tough. It's a great question. Because what I end up doing is using LVLs to terminate the ICFs. So in all the openings, I have a nice big wide, 16-inch wide LVL that inserts into the ICF, and so that's for the vertical bucks. As soon as you got to the roof assembly, I'm putting on basically a truss with a rim joist. So that ended up being, I used a wide plate, and I used Prosecco actually underneath the plate. Did your technique on the base, then put a seal, put a sealant bead there again, then bolted the plate down on top of that. So now when I did the transition between the truss and the 5/8 OSB, I was able to carry that down. I used a product called Sip Seal. It was 12 inches wide, and it's made out of acrylic, and it's a one piece of tape. Amazing stuff. I would start on the deck, roll it over the rim joist, and run it onto the bottom plate. And then I would do a sealant bead there. So it's a really tough connection between the ICF ICF and doing that. And if it wouldn't have been for your strategy, Steve, and the Prosecco, and you both were involved in that, getting that bond to be, the trades were just losing their mind over seeing the Prosecco ooze out every freaking corner that you could find. But when I looked at that, I thought, what a brilliant strategy to make sure that was.
When you see it, it's a good thing.
Yeah, it is cool.
When you see it oozing out
there,
it is.
It's a good thing. Yeah. It's when you don't see it, that's when you worry.
That's the tip. Yeah, that's for sure.
And all that's complicated by the fact that you have 10-foot ceilings or taller.
12-foot
ceilings.
But only
so all these
space.
details have to be duplicated 12 feet off the ground.
Right, only the living room is 12 because that's a proportion thing. The rest of the rooms are all 9. So I really wanted to make sure, like Steve, who's such a wonderful architect, it's all about this kind of pattern language in space. And everybody likes to go too large on even on porticos and places where you have porches where they're too tall and you go sit out there and they're like 14 feet in the air and you're like, I don't even feel like sitting out here. So we wanted to make sure that overhangs and porches had this proportional thing. And the living room just has a transom window only facing north, but no transoms on the south. So the doors are these, there's about 18 feet of doors. There's two 18-foot doors that can slide all the way left or all the way right. And that needed to be kind of that basic style. So I think that you had to have a 12-foot ceiling to have a 9-foot door and a transom, but it's right at the top. So the ceiling plane comes over, transom, door, and that's it. So not this silliness of ceiling space. Really cool.
It's another great way to piss your plaster guys off or your drywall guys off is run windows up to the ceiling.
Yeah, they don't like that very much. Yeah, they came out recently and looked and they go, seriously? And I'm like, I got to go. So just give me the bid. Yeah.
Exactly. Just do what you're told.
So is there a place where we can go and learn more about your house? Are you publishing somewhere?
Yeah, there's a couple places. One is Professional Builders doing a little story on it, and I coined the term Desert Comfort Project. So Desert Comfort was something that they've got. So if you go to Professional Builders website, there's a thing called Desert Comfort, and that's one. And then there's another magazine called Iconic Life, which is more about lifestyle, and it's called Iconic Life Net Zero. And so they have some stuff about that too. So, and then we're going to be I filmed every segment of it has been filmed, and then my youngest son actually is a videographer, and he's been filming all of it. So no one wants to follow a project for a year and a half. So what we did is we took all
why not force your
film
kid to do it?
Yeah, he's doing it all. It's really cool, and we'll start probably in October. Doing a 9-month. Release of it so that nobody has to watch this painful, excavation stage where it rains and it fills up with water and then you have to get a pump and pump it out. You're like, okay, that's just called a nightmare. So we'll try to do over 9 months the build and then it'll be finished in November. So November 2nd is the finish date. And then we're going to leave it open for a while. We're going to do some open houses. We're going to get some things people can kind of come through the garage. I'll have solar on the roof. I got 10K of solar. I've got backup batteries. I've got a Tesla car that I'm going to use as part of the storage and cycle things that they talked about today. So I just hope to make it something that's going to be last the test of time, I hope. And I'll learn from it like you always. Every time you do a project, you walk away and you're like I remember when
I'll never do it that way again.
Matt was out of the house. He goes, what would you have changed? And I go,
pretty much everything.
That flat roof makes me nuts. I liked the detail that you designed for the ICF instead of what I did. Yep. So Steve had this really good design where the parapet was placed on top of the SIPS roof, and I just let the ICF go all the way up. So I had to marry the two. So it's great to go every time you do something. You're like, oh damn. So but that's good. You gotta try stuff that you'd regret.
Well, and I learn way more from a mistake than a success.
So true. Yeah.
The second you have to fix it, especially when it's your own house, and you have to. I learned a lot at my house.
You got to see it every day. You walk down the stairs, and it's like, I gotta fix that damn thing.
Okay, so I'm letting you in on. We have a polished concrete floor in our living room, dining, kitchen entryway, and I've known it's there since the day we moved in, and my wife noticed it in the last 3 weeks. There is a sneaker mark in the concrete. It's not a dimple. It's literally just like the chemicals that were on their shoe left a mark where you can see that somebody stepped and then stepped back off. And I know it's there, and I always thought, man, I hope she never sees that. I have to try to explain
it's a fossil.
That to her. It's a fossil, yes. There's also a Sharpie mark on the floor where the
Converse fossil.
Forgot that they were going to have a toe kick on the backside of the island. So if you ever come to my house, there's a little bird's mouth Sharpie mark on the finished concrete floor.
Very funny. Something every time you have a cup of coffee, you look over and you're like, I know, you can see it.
Don't look
Now, I
that
probably
way.
could get the Sharpie thing off, and I just haven't because nobody else has seen it yet. So now it's play a game to see how long it takes my wife to notice that.
That's a great idea.
So what about outside of your house? What about finding you, Mark? How do people find you?
That's a good question. You know, I've got really 2 full-time jobs right now. I've been hired by a company called Hayward Lumber in California to be doing some business development for them. So now I travel California market from Santa Barbara up through Redwood City and San Francisco about every other week, and I'm helping them create a value chain between being conventional lumber and how they look at being better to their customers. So they're a 104-year-old company. Bill Hayward has been somebody really focused on air quality. He was the chair of FSC. And so he's kind of been an innovative builder. And so he's a lumber company owner. And he said, I'd really like to have you come in and help my company transition as a lumberyard to something more than that. So I've been helping them add products, innovation, window technology to their product mix. So the WUI interface work that I'm doing will be for 6 different cities in California. So I did all the burn work. We just finished in Santa Maria as preliminary. And then next week, we start the rough mock-up wall builds. And then the WUI interface classes in California begin on the 16th of August. So I'll do 6 cities with burn cycles. We're going to do mock walls. The fire department's going to come and bring a truck. We're going to have the local code officials come, and we're just going to talk about what are we going to do about fire. And so we've got manufacturers like Fortress is going to come and show how a deck, they talked about the deck sweeping up the back and lighting it up. So maybe a Fortress deck and rock wool and some of those things that help us build fire resistance. So in April, I did one for them in those same markets on water management. We did a 4-sided thing on rollers. We did fluid applied, mechanically attached, peel and sticks, and I like all of them. And I had such a great experience with some peel and sticks that I used. I found a product called Partel. It's called Exoperm 250 that I put on the building on the ICFs. And I learned that you have to clean ICFs before you put peel and sticks on. Really interesting things that are part of that. So I work with Hayward Lumber is that piece. And then Construction Instruction, of course, is a partner in the company. And I'm still involved there at Construction Instruction. So it's just Market Construction Instruction or LaLiberte at Hayward Lumber. Both of those I answer to. So I have 2 full-time jobs.
That's awesome.
I think this is what, 38 years of industry change looks like. And that's kind of why we wanted to have you on the podcast, is just say thanks.
Well, thank you, Jake. That's so kind.
I've learned a lot from you over the years.
Thank you.
And make sure you say hi to the hermit, Peter.
Peter, the old man.
Peter's also awesome. I see some of the things he's done, of course, for decades, and he's been a leader as well. I remember Nathan. I knew Nathan was part of
the American Lung Association stuff.
So he came involved after I'd already started in 1989 with the project that he came into the fold because as a thoracic, he really brought that kind of knowledge to the base too. And I got to know Peter from here, and the rest is history. So we're all friends, I think, in this industry.
Yeah, I think so.
Please say hello to
a lot of history.
Yeah, absolutely. And the gray.
You have to say it very loud to Peter now.
And slow.
Yes.
He's awesome.
Now that his physician has recommended he never travel ever again. I think that's our next stage with Peter, is him telling us that he's too old to travel. And we get to know if he listens to the Off Week podcast.
There we go.
Too, because we really made fun of him.
No, that's good. Well done. Well, thank you both so much for what you guys have done. I think your podcast has made a difference and an impact on industry, and I know how hard that is to every week and every time you do want to come up with a topic and make these things happen. I watch how you're sticking stickers all over the place and all over the world, actually. So thank you for what you're doing, because it makes a difference. And continue that
We're
process.
trying.
Yeah, I know you are. Good job.
Take us out, Mr. Host.
Yeah. Alrighty. So this is the audio version, but know that we do have some video versions where you can go on YouTube and find us there. Smash that subscribe button. Watch those videos. That's a good way to say it, Jake, and you know it. But anyways, thank Mark. You see Mark out there out and about in the industry. You thank him because a lot of what we do falls under his family tree there. So anyways, thanks again, Mark.
Thanks.
Unbuild it, people. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good day.